The stories you are about to see are from previously classified files of the U.S. Customs Service. They contain dramatic recreations and, whenever possible, actual surveillance footage. Today on U.S. Customs Classified, a customs inspector is brutally murdered, and the relentless hunt for his killer leads agents straight into a terrorist organization. Plus, busted on video. A special customs dive unit takes on a gang of stowaways and discovers what they're really hiding. And exclusive customs infrared video tracks a smuggler's fatal attempt to evade capture.
Perfect crime? Well, if it existed, you'd never know it. The crimes we hear about are the imperfect ones, where something or everything goes wrong. For the most part, criminals aren't the smartest people on earth. They tend to overlook important details. They make mistakes. And one of the biggest mistakes they can make is crossing paths with U.S. Customs. The U.S. Customs Port of Entry at Lyndon, Washington sits nestled in the shadows of the beautiful Cascade Mountains on the Canadian border.
Thank you, sir. Go on through.
For more than 2 years, Customs Inspector Jerry Ward enjoyed the quiet serenity of this isolated workplace.
Thanks, Jerry.
Jerry also enjoyed the company of his co-worker and friend, Inspector Galen Reimer. But one spring morning, the peaceful calm of this small border station was violently shattered.
Vancouver?
And how many days you been in Canada?
3 days.
Do you have any luggage?
No.
Here's a car from California with no luggage, claiming they've been in Canada 3 days, and something didn't fit.
Would you mind getting out of the car and coming in the building? It's just routine. You too, sir.
So I asked them both to step inside. I escorted them to the office and went back to my duties outside. Shortly thereafter, I heard a gunshot. And just as I got to the door, Jerry's head stuck in the window for a little bit, and I was just stunned. I had felt it, tried to feel his pulse several times, and I couldn't feel anything. So it's one of those things that you'll never forget.
The death of any innocent person is a tragedy. But when that person is a friend and co-worker, it takes on added dimension. The search for the killer can become a personal issue, and emotions can run high. The death of Inspector Jerry Ward is a case in point. The agents assigned to solve his murder were his friends, and they were determined to bring his killer to justice. That determination would take them into very dangerous territory. Within minutes of Jerry Ward's murder, an all-points bulletin was issued. Almost immediately, the suspects were spotted heading south. The chase, now joined by local, state, and federal authorities, lasted well into the night. wrong turn eventually forced the suspects to flee on foot into the rugged terrain. Search dogs and tracking teams were brought in to hunt down the fugitive couple. U.S. Customs agents Bill Gately and Brian Rackham joined in the search.
Within the first few minutes, I had learned that the inspector at Linden, Jerry Ward, had been shot. And it hurt. It hurt a lot to know it was him.
Jerry Ward and I had gone to our first customs training school together. We had remained fairly close friends from the time of that customs school until the time that he was murdered. We probably had 200 police officers in that 1 mile square area. We had the perimeter fairly well tightly sealed. I was standing by the railroad tracks, and the tracking team got the drop on him.
Freeze! Show me your hands!
Jerry Ward's killer was identified as Billy Joe Basker, an escaped felon convicted of the double murder of an elderly couple.
By the time he got to the bottom of the embankment, I was right there.
Anything you say will be and can be used against you in a court of law.
You're gonna kill me?
What are you talking? Why would
I said, well, why would they want to kill you? And he said, because of what I did to the guy up at the border. And that was the confession right there.
My first reaction was, thank God we found him. He said he had shot Jerry Ward because Jerry was the enemy. And he said, one thing I have to tell you is that the girl had nothing to do with it. She's completely innocent.
It's customs freeze! Put your hands up! Put them up!
8 hours later, the chase finally ended when agents captured Catherine LaFar, a 22-year-old college student from Northern California.
Let's go.
Okay, one more time from the top.
He was a hitchhiker. I just picked him up. I only knew him a couple of hours. That's it.
How long were you in Canada for?
We were in Canada for probably 3 days.
We? You said you only knew him a couple of hours.
She went from a fairly warm personality to a very cold, vacant stare.
I'm not going to talk to anyone else until I see my lawyer.
That told me something more about her.
All right.
That told me we had something happening here that just wasn't what it appeared to be.
3 days later, Catherine LaFar told her story again, this time to a judge at a preliminary hearing.
He was hitchhiking and I picked him up. That's all I know. We were driving along, and as we got closer to the border, I noticed that he started to get really nervous and fidgety. And we got to the border, and they asked us to step inside. And we went inside, and we gave them our licenses, and he started to get really nervous when the printer went on. It was like it made him think of something else, like, I don't know, a machine gun or something. And then he pulled out a gun. It scared the hell out of me. Then he shot the guy. I thought he was going to shoot me too. He forced me to go with him. That was the scariest day of my life.
She was an actress. It was an act. This little customs house that was more or less a scene out of a Rockwell painting had been transformed into a bloody crime scene. And when I was able to go through the crime scene, I could tell that it wasn't something that happened in the heat of passion. This was a cold-blooded assassination. There were not signs of a struggle.
Freeze! Don't move! Put your hands up! Put them up! Take it easy. Don't do anything! Don't move!
You could see that the initial impact of the rounds into Jerry Ward's body It happened at a time when he was on his knees.
Shut up! Take it easy, come on.
That he had crashed head first through a glass pane in the door.
It's coming!
Somebody's got to move him. This man's got both hands on a gun. When that door flew open and he fired point blank at Galen Reimer, she had to open the door. That had to be her. She was the only other person in the room.
Your Honor, we request a continuation of my client's bail.
Despite these glaring inconsistencies and over the strong objections of the DA, Catherine LaFar was released on bail.
The judge cut her loose. He didn't find that there was enough evidence to hold her on a charge of accessory after the fact murder. That meant she was going to walk out of there free as a bird. Her act had fooled everyone, and I just couldn't accept it. And we knew that she was going to be the challenge of her life. You know, she did it. But you can't prove it with your gut feeling. You got to prove it with evidence.
A grisly murder, 2 prime suspects, and a team of customs agents searching for clues. While the death of Inspector Jerry Ward might appear on the surface to be a random act of violence, as agents get closer to the truth, they discover that it hides a well-organized conspiracy and a threat to American lives. By all outward appearances, Catherine LaFar seemed to be exactly what she claimed, an innocent college student tragically caught up in a brutal murder. But as investigators looked deeper into her background, a darker, more sinister portrait of LaFar emerged. They learned that her connection to convicted murderer Billy Joe Basker was anything but innocent.
The extent and the complexity of the case began to be obvious when we began to associate the male defendant with a revolutionary group that was based in the northern part of California.
The investigation led customs agents Rockham and Gately to San Francisco, where an informant finally helped expose Catherine LaFar's secret life.
They bought this place about a year ago, but they own property all around the area. They work and operate out of this restaurant. They're inside. I've got to go.
What we ran into was her connection to an organization that, on the front, looked as though it was a small restaurant and a little hotel. But under that, and we found that she was a leader of a revolutionary group that espoused the violent overthrow of the United States government.
The fact that LaFar and Basker were both members of an underground terrorist group had to be more than a coincidence. Agents Gately and Rockham eventually connected the couple to a terrorist commune on a secluded ranch in Northern California.
We had to rappel down a cliff, and it took us about 5 or 6 hours of careful movement just to get to the wooded area that was adjacent to the commune. And we laid there and we listened for several hours.
We had traced both of them to a guerrilla warfare training camp. They practiced with automatic weapons. They practiced assaults on law enforcement officials. Their targets were painted blue with gold badges on them, like policemen.
We could tell that the dogs in the commune began to suspect that we were up there. And then we began to hear movement coming up to our location. And the noises kept on getting closer and closer. Bill and I devised our escape plan, who was going to move first, who was going to cover whom, who was going to do the shooting first. The noise got to within about 15 feet of us, and it stopped. And so Bill and I laid there, not hardly even breathing. It was extremely hot up there, and the sweat pouring off me, dripping in my eyes, and I kept on wiping my eyes so that they wouldn't be blurry if I did have to do something. So after about an hour, we made the decision that we were going to move. So I moved first, got to some cover, we didn't hear anything, then Gately moved, and the distance that took us 5 hours to get into took us about 30 minutes to get out of.
The final piece of the puzzle came when customs agents learned that LaFar and Basker shared much more than just extreme political views. The couple was actually married, and they were the parents of a young child.
Moved a tattoo from Rogers. Says his wife was with him, Catherine LaFar.
She was the one that recruited him from the California prison. Somebody to do the soldiering, to commit violent crimes.
The 9 long months of investigation had paid off. Catherine LaFar's bail was immediately revoked, and U.S. Customs moved in.
Down any Jake?
They conducted simultaneous raids on the ranch and the restaurant. Authorities arrested dozens of suspects and seized a virtual armory of weapons and explosives.
Miss Customs! Put down the gun! Put down the gun! Put down the gun! Turn around! Turn around! Turn around against the wall. Check the freezer. Check the freezer.
They had 3 100-pound boxes of dynamite. They had several weapons, and they had at least a couple of stolen cars.
Billy Joe Basker was convicted of first-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole.
On, Mr. Foreman.
For her part in the brutal murder of U.S. Customs Inspector Jerry Ward, Catherine LaFar received a 15-year sentence in federal prison.
In charge of, we find the defendant guilty.
The best feeling I had was they know your act is over. No one believes your act anymore.
The memory of Inspector Jerry Ward's life and his senseless and tragic death still haunts all of those involved in this investigation.
He died in the line of duty. And he was doing exactly what he should have done. And I think that's a good accommodation for him.
7 years after his death, a new customs building was erected at the U.S.-Canadian border crossing at Lyndon, Washington. It was dedicated to the memory of Inspector Jerry Ward. Billy Joe Basker was sentenced to life in prison for first-degree murder. Catherine LaFar received 15 years as an accessory after the fact. Customs officers rarely have any sympathy for drug smugglers. They view these criminals as a menace to society, out to make a fast buck off of other people's misery and addiction. But in our next story, inspectors befriend a drug smuggler. Why? Because this particular smuggler is unlike any they've met before. This one is truly innocent. John F. Kennedy International Airport, New York. A cargo shipment from Colombia arrives. It contains a sheepdog and is addressed to a local post office box number. This unusual destination catches the eye of Customs Inspector Mike Maloney.
I came across an airway bill that listed a live dog as cargo. I made a note to check the freight further.
You got a dog on board here?
Let's take a look at it, Tom.
Looking closely at the dog, you could tell the dog was extremely ill, very lethargic, and all skin and bones. Then I looked at the belly. It looked like the dog was pregnant. But when I felt the abdomen, it was very hard and rigid.
I don't know. We better set this up for an X-ray.
I felt it very odd that someone would spend as much money as they did to ship a dog from Colombia and not care enough to be there for the dog.
The dog was transferred to the vet port, and veterinarian Steve Weinstein was called in.
Let me take a look at her. Let me just get her up here. Come on, stand up. The dog was in very poor condition. She was emaciated and depressed. She was skinny as can be. Upon examination, I felt masses in the abdomen. Either this dog has a large tumor in her abdomen or she has a foreign body. I don't know which. So I recommended that we take an x-ray, and if need be, we'll do an exploratory laparotomy, meaning we're going to surgically open her up and take a look inside. Set up the x-ray, please. Good. A little to the left. Let's take the shot. Okay. All right, shoot, Janine.
She was great. She was a sweetheart. She never even moved.
Guys, you're not going to believe this. I have never seen anything like this in my life. There's something inside this dog. I mean, he is full of all these foreign objects. I don't know what it is. Under the circumstances, I think the best thing to do would be open this dog up and let's do surgery and see what's inside. It's like this. Just like
Put a towel in here to be easier for them.
While Dr. Weinstein carefully prepared the dog for surgery, customs inspectors remained nearby to photograph the proceedings for any future legal or criminal actions. Inside the dog's abdomen, Dr. Weinstein finds condoms filled with cocaine.
When I saw Dr. Weinstein remove the first package, I was absolutely amazed that this size package was inside the store.
More of it, guys. It actually felt like bricks of concrete. Had the condoms ruptured, she would have died. Once the condoms were inserted into her abdomen, bacteria started to grow, and she literally had an infection inside her abdomen that had no place to go. People could do this to a dog.
After 15 minutes of watching the doctor remove package after package, I began to feel very angry that someone would use a dog in such a manner to transport their cocaine into the United States.
The doctor removed 10 condoms containing a total of 5 pounds of cocaine with an estimated street value of $3 million.
Dr. Weinstein said to us that he wasn't really sure if this dog would survive. The next 24 hours were critical, and I was really upset. I mean, we only had one goal in mind, to find out who did this to this animal and make sure justice was served.
All right, here's what we're going to do. George and I are in the back room with the dog.
Customs inspectors handed the case over to a crime task force to set up a sting. A phone call was made to inform the person with a post office box that his dog had cleared customs and was ready to be picked up.
They're coming in. All right, good. We say, you know, is this your dog? You got to make sure he says, that's my dog. Any problems so
Well,
far?
we got a slight problem. I can't give him the real dog because the real dog's recovering from surgery.
This guy probably won't even know what the real dog is.
Right, you're really right. I'll bring my dog. We'll use my dog. You got it? We're taking the office.
Within 24 hours, the drug courier took the bait.
I was in the back room, and I was notified by our teams outside that they saw a car that they thought might be the suspect pulling in front. So I told everybody to get into position that this may be our man coming to the vet port.
I heard the dog.
Sure, do you have your customs release?
When he approached the counter, he put down papers and he requested the dog that had been lodged at the vet port.
Print 601.
Yeah, is this your dog?
Hey, there he is. Yeah, thanks for that.
Please, don't move. Get up against the wall. What are you doing? Get against the wall.
What the hell's going on here? What are you doing?
You're under arrest. You're taken.
For what? I'm under arrest for what?
Conspiracy to import cocaine to the United States.
Cocaine?
You're not my dog. Anything you say can will be used against you before the law. Understand your rights?
The man under arrest, Peter Simmons, refused to cooperate with customs, citing fear for the safety of his family. He went to jail without ever naming the people in Colombia responsible for putting the drugs inside the dog.
I was happy that the whole incident was over and the dog was all right and everybody was safe. It was a good day. Makes you feel good when you get somebody like this.
As for the sheepdog that started this case, she was given a new name, Cokie, and we can happily report that she's fully recovered.
Well, 6 months later, I saw the dog. The dog was roughly twice the size that it was. It was at least twice the weight, and a very healthy, happy dog. And the Customs Canine Service is bringing it around to high schools and junior high schools to teach kids about drug awareness. The dog is serving a very useful service in the country.
Peter Simmons was convicted of drug smuggling and was sentenced to 37 months in prison. Cokie remains U.S. Customs canine mascot.
Later, exclusive Customs video takes you inside one of the most bizarre smuggling rings in the world. But next, an inexperienced pilot leads agents on a cross-country chase that ends in disaster.
Michael Smith, a down-on-his-luck cargo pilot, found himself stranded in South America with no job, no money, and no prospects, until he fell in with a drug smuggling ring. 3,000 pounds of marijuana would be Michael's ticket home to the States. This would be Michael's first attempt at a life of crime, and his inexperience would leave him totally unprepared for what lay ahead. Smith was a pawn, an expendable player in a dangerous game. The men he worked for were only concerned with one thing: putting their drugs on the street without being caught. If push came to shove, they would sacrifice anyone, including Michael. This is the story of one cargo pilot who learned this lesson the hard way.
You guys hear about our latest air caper? Unbelievable. Just a couple of days ago, the Customs aircraft right on routine patrol, the Black Hawk, the King
Michael
Air.
Smith was first detected on radar by the tracking center at the U.S. Naval Base in Guantanamo, Cuba.
A low-flying aircraft, not on flight plan, which is required by international law, flying without lights. This is, in our mind, is a very highly suspect target.
We got the go-ahead from our representative at the Navy radar site to launch. At that point, we just followed the airplane, we identified it, we followed it all the way up.
As they're coming by our South Florida location here, we launch out of Homestead Air Force Base. You've got the bad guy flying along. You've got the citation above him, about 3,000 feet above him, maybe 2 miles behind him. And they have a forward-looking infrared, which is a FLIR, like a black and white camera inside the cockpit. They also have radar, tell them how far away they are. Tells the bad guy's altitude, his heading, his airspeed, and our closure rate on him. So we stay back behind him, lights out, following him.
All flying without lights. Man, they apparently get really hairy up there.
Hey, Doug, this is 4-0. Being a little follow behind, I'll turn my storms on momentarily here for you. We're about a mile or 2 miles behind the citation. Go.
Michael Smith had no equipment on board to alert him to his flock of pursuers.
When we got up around the northeast Georgia area, the target began maneuvering. Well, this is an indication to us that the target has reached its area of intended landing.
At this point, Michael Smith was actually leading the agents to the pickup point.
Boy, you're starting to circle, you know? You might be lost. Yeah.
And all of a sudden, the bad guy now starts dropping down lower and flies over a field, and lights come on.
There's a big field down there with 3 hot spots in it. There's a strip down there, it looks like. Yeah, and there's signals on the ground. Yeah, no damn fooling. 2 fires. Hey, this is it. He's going in, man.
They got close to where they were supposed to land. Unfortunately, though, his ground crew is down below, runway lights on. Well, apparently they must have made the surveillance of the Customs aircraft coming in. So, if you can believe it, they just shut the lights off. They shut the lights off from the sky. Unreal. No honor among thieves, huh?
By turning out the lights, the ground crew was trying to hide their position from the army of agents above. Michael was now only a few hundred feet from being captured, if he could land. But without runway lights, he was also only a few hundred feet from death.
Okay, the light just went out. Yeah, the boys just think they finally heard us up here and turned the light out.
It's hard to imagine what must have been going through Michael's mind, flying at low altitude in the dead of night, and now with nowhere to land.
That particular night, there was a low radiation fog coming off the ground, coming up. And so down that low, visibility is not very good at all. And he puts his landing lights on. He does his typical box pattern come into land.
Okay, I got him on the flare again. Okay, he's right 90.
They pick up some radio transmissions in the meantime, and apparently this guy's he's running out of fuel, so he's got to do something quick.
We've got about 100 feet, 110 knots. He's got to go in anyway, he's out of fuel.
Shortly afterwards, we saw on the infrared where the guy was making a turn. We saw the trees coming up, and of course he didn't.
You can see this man is trying to land in some place. He's trying to do Mission Impossible. There's no way he can land. You can't see the fields at.
You know, I'm not going to try to maneuver with him here because there's just so much crap going on. Yeah. I told you we might see somebody die here. He crashed. He just crashed. Did he crash? He just crashed. There's a fireball. There's a fireball. The plane broke apart. I'd say we have fatalities. Okay, our target has just crashed. It's on fire. If you have our location, we are orbiting over the scene at this time. We are orbiting over the scene. The aircraft did crash. Omaha 5-2, roger, and we'll notify the authorities of the crash. I'd say there's no chance for survivors.
I hate to see anyone die a violent death like that. It bothered me for several days. It was the first time I'd ever seen anyone actually die when I was chasing them, and I would have much rather seen us be able to land behind the guy, arrest him, and let the courts take whatever action they deem necessary.
I've seen fatalities before. At that particular time, I said, oh, well, this guy, he's paid the price. And there was over 3,000 pounds of marijuana still recovered from the crash itself. It was not burned up. It's tightly compacted, so it doesn't burn that easy. And we found 2 bodies at the scene.
The charred remains tell a chilling tale of cruelty and betrayal among smugglers. The death of Michael Smith is its lesson. Michael Smith's death may eventually come back to haunt the drug dealers he worked for. When they are caught, they will be charged with murder.
Next, busted on video. A clever gang of criminals gets outwitted by a Customs Marine Enforcement unit.
The main objective of every customs investigation is to solve the case and get their man. In our next story, a group of highly trained divers get their man in an unexpected place. Customs caught them on videotape as they were busted. A tip that a freighter might be transporting cocaine sends a U.S. Customs dive team into the water for a closer inspection.
We had guys on the dock ready to assist in any way. We had no idea what was going to happen.
2 Marine enforcement officers, Tim Unger and David Fry, swim to the rudder area of the ship. And that's when they discover that there's more hidden on board than just cocaine.
I could observe the opening into the rudder housing well. I could see several bodies up inside the well. It took me by surprise.
As soon as he poked his head up, people started coming out. So we both backed off and tried to get the situation under control.
After the suspects were rounded up, Agents Fry and Unger returned to the ship and crawled up into the rudder housing where the men had hidden.
Okay. I need the lights up here.
When we got up in there, the walls of that compartment were all rust. It was dark in there. There was no light other than the light coming from the hole underneath. It was like you were in a cave.
When they got into this hole in the ship, the more it gets loaded, the further down in the water it sinks. So the area they were up in actually filled up with water about halfway.
There were scrap pieces of line strewn together like a giant spider's web where they had been laying. There were some makeshift hammocks. The cocaine was higher than everybody. I mean, they had placed that at the highest level in that compartment to keep it dry. They were going to sacrifice, I guess, themselves before the cocaine.
There was 858 pounds of cocaine found, approximately 365 brick-like packages that were in 11 bags.
There's 11 bags.
that are in the back of this truck that came from the hull of the motor vessel Spring Bride.
The value of the shipment, since this was pure Colombian cocaine, would probably be about $100 to $146 million. We also found 5 handguns, revolvers inside the compartment.
5 guns? Is that it?
The suspects were armed and dangerous, and yet they hadn't put up a fight.
They were in bad shape. They'd been in that hole for 5 days like a cocoon. They stood in the water up to their chest, and they would take turns sleeping that way. It wasn't a pleasure cruise for them. Most of them claimed they were just stowaways. They didn't know how the dope got up in there. But these guys knew what they were doing. Their job was to secure that dope all the way to its intended recipients here in the United States.
That's it. Okay, this is a bunch of clothes and food that they had stuffed up in the hole.
We found wallets and identification that matched up with all the stowaways. In some of these wallets, we found telephone numbers and names that turned out to be contact numbers for the recipients of this cocaine.
We had an agent make a phone call, and he set up a meeting in Galveston.
Video surveillance was set up in a van parked across the street from the restaurant. After waiting for over an hour, the agents were finally approached by 3 Colombian drug dealers. Moments later, the bus signal was given.
A couple of those guys tried to run from us to get away, but they didn't run very far. They were pretty well surrounded.
Not only did I feel like I had been an effective part in the drug war, but I felt like, as a rookie, I'd finally cut my teeth. And what a case to do that.
It was the largest seizure of cocaine made on the Gulf Coast, and it effectively brought an end to underwater smuggling in the Houston-Galveston area.
On the next U.S. Customs Classified, agents follow a trail of murders that lead to a madman killing everyone who gets in his way, including his own family. Plus, a customs inspector suddenly finds himself in the role of a doctor, and now he must help deliver a child. And criminals in a high-speed boat chase with customs agents make one last desperate attempt to avoid capture.
I hope you'll join me for the next edition of U.S. Customs Classified. I'm Stephen J. Cannell.